If I was the deep state and I wanted to destroy America, I would rig the election with a puppet candidate. One that was so compromised that they would never say a word about it. I would create a false flag that allows for mail-in ballots. I would be in charge of the ballot counting machines. I would create a false flag to blame all who question the results of the election. If I was the deep state, I would prosecute anyone that went against me. I would sue and prosecute anyone that spoke up about the fraudulent election. I would use my powers to shut down all your internet businesses and bankrupt you. If I was the deep state, I would make everyone an example why you should never question a Democrat ever winning an election. I would imprison my foes. I would use my corrupt DAs and blackmail judges to destroy you. I would make sure all crimes I ever committed never happened. I would prosecute my biggest competition. I would make sure they could never run for office ever again. If I was the deep state, I would convince everyone that Ukraine Nazis were good and women are men. If I was the deep state, I would own every politician that mattered. If I was the deep state, I would push my pedophilia ambitions on you. If I was the deep state, you'd question your sexual identity but not the medical establishment. If I was the deep state, you would fear to ever resist me. If I was the deep state, you would wish I was really the devil. If I was the deep state, I would say mission accomplished.
Today, obviously, more information coming through with the Trump conviction, people trying to get their footing into what's going on. But big news coming from Alex Jones, who seems to really have been upset by claims that the Biden administration is looking to lock him out of his own studio and close him down. And the timing is very, very good because I'm going to be joined in just a moment by our second guest, Josh Bernstein. I'll read you his details in just a sec. I just had a bit of difficulty with Josh with the camera today, so we're going to have to go audio only. We'll put his picture up there. That won't stop. Josh is a prolific interviewer and newsman from the US with his show, Josh Bernstein Uncensored. If you want to go to his website, jbushow.com to check out there. So Josh, as I said, Josh Bernstein is a TV talk show host. He's a news anchor, political commentator. Josh has been a guest on over 4,000 radio shows over the past 11 years and has been called a political savant by the late American legend from radio, Barry Farber. And as I said, his website, jbushow.com. Josh Bernstein, welcome to Weekends.
Oh, it's great to be back on the program with you.
Good on you, Josh, and I appreciate your time. And yeah, good old internet and tech always manages to get us at certain stages. But Josh, you would be flat out. And I was just looking back on your website the other day, and just at the various people that you'd interviewed, including Dr. Ben Carson, you had Paul Manafort on. I was wondering if you could fill us in on some of the other people that you've been able to interview recently.
Well, recently I've interviewed Carrie Lake. I've interviewed Marjorie Taylor Greene. That was a fun interview. I've interviewed Mike Lindell several times. Roger Stone's been on the show 4 or 5 times at least. And so, I've had other interviews with people that are not in politics too. Sports legends. I had one of the original Temptations members on. I had the only musical savant through brain injury, a guy by the name of Derek Amato. A pretty interesting story. TV talk show host Montel Williams was on. He talked about his multiple sclerosis. So obviously the majority of my stuff is certainly in the political realm, but I mean, I'll talk to anybody. I've always said that I'll interview anybody. I'll talk to anybody. And honestly, I hate knowing what we're going to talk about before I get on the air, because it's more fun not knowing what's going to be asked of you.
Well, maybe we'll throw you a few curveballs this hour.
Please do.
I guess that it's such an interesting topic to watch. Poor old Alex Jones, and we say poor old because I've never seen anyone get targeted the way that he has. And it's kind of, in Australia, we would call it the tall poppy syndrome, the idea that if someone seems to be sticking their head up above everyone else, people come along and like to knock it off. And this is a very un-American thing, a tall poppy syndrome, but it seems in the space that we are operating in, anyone who is working to counter the narrative and sticks their head up, they pay a very heavy price. Now, it was only a couple of weeks ago that this fellow Gavin O'Blennis was tricked into an interview, one of these undercover, what do you call them, James O'Keefe style of interviews. It wasn't James O'Keefe that did it. And O'Blennis revealed some interesting information that hadn't necessarily been released before, one of which was the FBI had agents on the ground on January 6th. But he also specifically named Alex Jones and said that the FBI knew there was nothing they could get him on for Sandy Hook, but they intimated to the victims that they could go after him civilly. And he sort of smirked, this O'Blennis character, and said, yeah, that's how we kind of got him, by paralyzing him and crippling him and costing him a fortune. So I'm wondering if this, therefore, it can't be a coincidence here. This seems to be part of these tactics in this lawless Biden administration that we're witnessing. Have you got any thoughts on the Jones story at the moment?
Yeah, I think, well, you did hit on a lot of it, to be quite honest. So good on you being in Australia, but still knowing the American media so well. Yeah, that Glennis story was, he was trying to impress a lady or something. He was out on a date and he just started blabbering about all these different things. And one of the things that he did say, as you mentioned, is that, our goal was to go after Alex Jones, but we didn't want to jail him. He didn't do anything wrong. As a matter of fact, the guy says Alex Jones didn't commit any crimes. We just wanted to bankrupt him and put him out of business. That's why we went after him. And so you would assume that because of that crazy, Sandy Hook conviction and all that, that his attorneys would be able to use that admission on camera, saying what happened, as a way to appeal, the conviction and the financial restitution that, of course, they're trying to get him to pay. Now, what's interesting is the state of Texas actually passed a law a few years back that capped the amount of money that someone could win, in a lawsuit. And so he was protected by that. But I think what this is they know that Alex is someone that has a large following, has been in the fight since the beginning against the deep state, against the globalists, against all those people. And they're looking for an opportunity to shut him down. They know they can't do it through freedom of speech. And they know he hasn't broken any rules or laws. So I think what they're doing is they're trying to squeeze him and take his money in his studio to pay back the restitution from, this terrible, conviction that they did to him. So they set him up and they used him and they wanted him. And this is what these people do when you go against their narratives.
Now, I'd also had what I would call reliable intel that told me that Jones had transferred, and I'm not sure if this is legal, but transferred his assets into the names of other people, specifically to keep InfoWars on air, because, and this is the thing. So this is an interesting one to watch yet again, but all this stuff has to be clarified. And the character, I would say, of Alex Jones, as opposed to the man Alex Jones, is, the on-screen persona, if you will. Some people accuse him of saying that he's announced that he's an entertainer, as opposed to a newsman. Like, what difference does that make? I mean, goodness me, if you watch CNN, it's not news, it's entertainment. Yeah. They just provide fodder for the diminishing Democrat supporters. So it's, again, disturbing, but it just shows you the tactics that we're all up against. Now, just on that, that's an interesting point, isn't it? That the censorship through big tech social media from pretty much, the beginning of the COVID years is when they really piled it on, but it still happened during the Trump administration. What it caused, though, of course, that people like Alex Jones were deplatformed, firstly on YouTube, and then it went through, Twitter, etc.
It was one of the originals.
Exactly, and it forces them to start their own websites and to play off. But people still get their own websites taken away. So my point here is that the audience goes with these broadcasters like Alex Jones. And as you said, he's got a large audience. Now, this is, when we're saying large, we're talking in the millions, right? People who are off social media who are not interacting. So it means that the social media engagement is already out of whack with reality, because a vast side of the political spectrum is not interacting per se. And so this must be the great unknown now within the I guess the deep state politicians, who are really panicking, wondering what people are thinking, Josh.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of thought police stuff happening right now. I think that, they keep doing and going after anyone that doesn't put up their, official narrative. and we're going to continue to speak. We're going to continue to speak up. And, you know, it's said that here I am in the United States of America, the land of the free. In order for me to speak freely in my own country, I have to rely on security outside of it. And I think when you put that into perspective, you can see clearly what is happening to the West, what is happening to Australia, New Zealand, what's happening to Europe, what's happening to Canada. The Western nations, you know, we're under attack, and we're under attack from globalists. And these globalists want their countries, their things, their resources, whatever it is, and they look at us as, you know, useless eaters. Okay, they want us to eat bugs. They want us to drink, you know, recycled sewer water, while they snack on, you know, filet mignon and caviar. So we have these unelected, because remember, they're unelected. You have these unelected bureaucrats, these globalists that have billions and billions of dollars, and they're trying to control all of the Western countries. And they know that if they can get to America, well, then they pretty much got it all at that point. Because look at Canada. Canada is, you know, basically run by, you know, a tyrant, you know, from you know, Justin Trudeau. You know, then you've got, of course, Mexico has, you know, its issues as well. And Europe, it seems like they can't hold on to a prime minister very long, and that's been a disaster as well. So, and then Australia and New Zealand, unfortunately, you know, there's all great patriots and great people in all of these areas, all these countries. I've got tons of, you know, supporters in Australia and New Zealand and Tasmania, and I've never been to that part of the world, but I'm sure it's absolutely breathtakingly gorgeous. And it's sad because we have so many people that are trying to just destroy all of Western civilization. We've got to understand that. And that's why we have to continue to do what we're doing and fight back as best we can.
It certainly is a common theme for us here in the West, wondering what's been going on. And this is a war that has an information war that's pretty much taken place for mine since April of 2015. And that was the date that Bernie Sanders announced that he was running for president. That was the first one that got the Democrats' nose out of joint. An immediate influx of support on our social media blew up. It's kind of when I started observing and getting into this 24/7. And I've repeated this many times on the show, but when he capitulated at the convention to Hillary, despite saying that he would contest, I've never seen so many people fall in a heap. And by the time Trump became president, I never saw anything like it. Nobody spoke of Trump who was a Bernie Sanders supporter, but overnight in my little silo of, you know, 5,000 friends, etc., on Facebook at the time, half of them overnight became Trump supporters without any of them mentioning it to anyone. So it was never a conversation, and they just kept going from that point. And what was interesting, of course, was to understand why that was. People were very, very afraid at the time of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the TPP, as a great indication of globalism, right? It was this great globalist stitch-up that was going to allow a foreign corporation to sue another country if they weren't allowed to do business there. This was one of the things that was written in this document. So when Sanders and Trump side together and both were anti-TPP, we knew that there was a globalist aspect and there was a non-globalist aspect. And I think that the average Joe in the street had worked this out, but people in the government still can't work out what globalism is, let alone their constituents who are completely in the dark, Josh. How do you rationalize that?
You know what? I've always said this, you know, tyranny is sold as convenience. And what I mean by that is our cell phones, you know, our ability to get in our cars and go to the malls and shop and do all these different things. And a lot of that we can do right on our phones. And so it's that keep them busy, keep their minds full of mush while we destroy the world, they won't be noticing. And I think that that's what a lot of this is. And I think that that's kind of why they've pushed so much for the technology and things like that. And remember, they say, oh, we'll make these voting machines for you. It'll be nice and easy. You just hit a button. But again, that's how tyranny is sold. Tyranny is sold as convenience. We'll make your life easier, but by doing that, here's what we're really doing. We're going to take away your rights and things like that. So I think that people have to just, you know, decompartmentalize that in their minds and just understand. And, part of the thing that I talk about in my book, Preserving Liberty, is that, there's a lot of solutions out there, and those solutions are not in government. Those solutions are in the people. Those solutions are in the fact that we outnumber the globalists, millions and 2 million, 10 million, 20 million to 1 in some aspects. And so there's just not that many of them. So what I always say is this is basically being a situation where we're being run by the tyranny of the minority. That's what this is. It's tyranny by the minority. We are the majority, and we don't believe in tyranny. And at some point, the world is going to have to make a decision, and they're going to say, what type of world do we want to live in? Do we want to live in freedom and liberty and prosperity? Or do we want to live, in slavery and bondage and all that? I can tell you there are millions upon millions of Americans like me, that think like me, that act like me, that, feel like me. And we're, 100 million strong here. And so there are a lot of people, like yourself, Jason, and so many others in these countries. And those are the people that have to understand that if they want to save their countries, they have to be active. They've got to be active, and they've got to be watching. A lot of it is distraction. That's why I always say, so many people are distracted. And when people are distracted and they're focused on something else, then how do you think the election was stolen in the United States of America? It was put together in May of 2020. What happened at the end of May of 2020? You had the George Floyd thing. So while everybody in America, and the world for that matter, were focused on that, they were meeting in Washington, D.C. at conferences with Democrats and Republicans, both parties of the establishment, figuring out ways to, steal the election from President Trump. So again, in America, at least what I see moving forward, as Tucker Carlson said, if they don't kill him, Tucker thinks that that could be something that these sickos would do. God, I hope not. But, I think that RFK Jr. is the key to the 2024 presidential race, and I'll explain why. President Trump, in my opinion, and I've said this many times, I don't believe he won the election in 2016. I think that Jill Stein put him in the White House because the Hillary folks didn't count on the Green Party being as strong as it was in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Those were the states that put Trump over the top, and they had to give it to him. Because remember, he was not supposed to win in 2016. They had it baked in against him. In 2020, they said there's no way we're going to let him win. And in 2020, you didn't have a robust middle. In other words, you didn't have a lot of independent voters or Green Party for that matter. There was very, very little. It was less than 2% of the vote was in the middle. 2024, you have RFK Jr., who was a Democrat, who is still a Democrat, regardless of what he's running for in America, which is an independent. But I see the thing pops up that you have a break coming. If you want to hold me over, I'll finish.
Let's pause for that right now, Josh. It's a good idea. When we come back, because there's a lot more I'd like to discuss with you about RFK Jr. I too believe that he is a key in other ways as well. Now, before we take the break, did you know that there are many ways that you can watch or listen to TNT? Why not stream us direct from our website on your desktop, tablet, or mobile device, or download our app from the App Store? We even stream live on X, YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. We've got you covered on today's News Talk TNT. And welcome back to Weekends. My guest this hour is Josh Bernstein from the show Josh Bernstein Uncensored. You can look that up, joshbernsteinuncensored.com, and you'll go straight to his website, and you'll be able to see some of the interviews that he's done with some very high-profile guests. Josh, before the break, we was discussing RFK Jr. from the perspective of how he may influence as a third-party candidate, not dissimilar to Jill Stein. Keep going with your explanation.
Yeah, so RFK Jr., again, a Democrat, and of course, they wouldn't let him run in the primaries. They kept him off the ballots and everything else. Then he asked for, Secret Service protection, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and they turned him down. So I think RFK Jr. said, okay, fine. You don't want me to run as a Democrat. You don't want me to be part of the, political process or anything like that. then I think what I'll do is I'll run as an independent, and I think I'll help President Trump. Now, the reason I say that is because RFK Jr. is polling at least 10%, sometimes as much as even 14%. And you also have Cornel West, who is an African American. He's also running. And then, of course, you have Jill Stein, believe it or not, running again as well. So the middle is at least 12, 14, 15%. And again, the majority of that being RFK Jr. That's the difference in 2024. It's going to be, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's going to be a lot harder to steal when you have to worry about 14 to 15 to 16% of the vote coming in the swing states to RFK Jr. So, that alone is what gives me at least, cautiously optimistic hope for a possible victory in 2024 for President Trump.
On a possible victory for Trump, have you considered who his administration may include, such as a vice president and attorney general?
Well, the attorney general he's talked about would probably be Attorney General from Texas, Ken Paxton, who was the one that fought and brought the lawsuit to the United States Supreme Court of Pennsylvania versus Texas, in which they tried to, get them to intervene into the stolen election, the clearly stolen election of 2020. And they wouldn't take the case. The Supreme Court would not take the case, but he was the one that brought it. So I think in that scenario, more than likely, you would have Ken Paxton as that position. As far as a vice president, I've been saying this for the longest time. I'm the only one in the media that I've ever heard say this, honestly. President Trump, it's not, okay, when you pick a VP in America, this is how it's always been in our history. You pick a VP to find out, can he help win a certain state that I have to win in order to be able to win? Okay, maybe that. Okay, he checks that box. Okay, does he have experience maybe that I don't have, that he can fill in? Kind of like with Barack Obama, who was brand new, didn't have any foreign policy experience. And unbelievably, they picked Joe Biden as the one for the extra foreign policy experience because he was on a couple of committees. I mean, ridiculous. But anyway, the story for another day. And so this is where, you have this whole entire situation. And I think what's going to happen ultimately here is that I think President Trump is going to be in a good position to win. But again, it's not who votes, it's not how they vote, it's who counts those votes. And these companies that are out there, a lot of the votes are being counted offshore, still in outside of the counties here in America. So there's always those challenges as well. But I don't know. I have a feeling that, we're going to come out on top. So,
well, I do feel the same, but I think now that we're in uncharted waters since the conviction of Trump last week on these 34 counts, and well, pretty much any pundit is saying that he will win on appeal, but how you drag it out and the usefulness for political fodder. But in a country that, and this is an interesting observation, Josh, here in Australia, if you are financially in trouble and you are forced to go into bankruptcy, the process of doing so is fraught with all sorts of anxiety and delay, etc., because it's considered to be horrific. When a person then finally declares bankruptcy, they ask themselves why they didn't do it years earlier. The phone stops ringing. You're still allowed to earn money. You're still allowed to save the money that you haven't spent yet. You're still allowed to own a car, etc. Not an expensive one, but your life gets back to some form of normality. But in the United States, entrepreneurship is something that the country has been founded upon, and what makes the United States the great country that always has been through innovation. So going bankrupt in the US is not a big deal. In fact, it's something that many people pride themselves on, that nobody, I've heard people say, in the US until you've gone bankrupt, lost it all, built it back up and become successful all over again. It's like a badge of honor. So when somebody like Trump is taken out in a country at the same time has huge problems with respecting the police, defund the police, etc. So you've got a whole base in the community that are saying, well, I've also been mistreated by the judicial system. I now identify with Donald Trump when before I was supposed to identify with the Democrats. Has this got some influence over the electorate?
I think it does. I clearly do. I've said for the longest time the magical numbers, because of the 10 to 12% fraud rate, let's face it, in every single election from the Democrats. I've always said that, if you can get 40% and 25%, and what I meant by that was 40% of the Hispanic vote and 25% of the African American vote, you pretty much have taken a pretty large percentage of their base away, and they probably would not be able to win. But we're seeing numbers right now coming out, of the Black community at plus 30%, which is unbelievable. I mean, even if they're just polls and he gets 22, 24%, that is a huge, huge, huge difference. And of course, the Hispanic Americans, they don't like this either. No one likes what's going on here, regardless of what your skin color is or anything else. And I think what's happening is that that's closer to over 50% for Trump, maybe 50, 51%, 52%. If those types of numbers hold up, and honestly, to be quite honest, maybe the Jewish vote, maybe my folks will finally wake up and realize that voting for Democrats is not the smartest thing to do. And so maybe then, the Jewish vote will also increase to maybe 30%, 35%. I mean, it should be 100% with what just happened on October 7th, but that's a whole nother story. So we'll see what happens. I think that the minority demographics should be creeping up considerably in favor of President Trump.
Josh, I'm going to throw a real controversial curveball. I'm going to incorporate what my colleague Johnny Vedmore just said in the promo that you probably saw when he was giving it to the Q supporters. Now, I want to talk about this for a moment, specifically for one statement that came out of there, which was Israel saved for last for a reason not ever shown here. Now, this has led to many Q supporters to be pro-Palestine, and we know that Trump, who Q's meant to support, is pro-Israel, and this has created great conflict within the movement. Now, I kind of want to apply Occam's razor to this overall discussion that I'm going to sort of plant the seeds for now. Once Trump gets elected in the Oval inauguration, if he's promised to end the war with Ukraine on day one of the presidency, it would therefore stand to reason that it would be up to Putin to be able to come up with an idea with the backing of a US administration to end the war. Now, at that point, China would have to be waiting in the wings to give its support to ending the war, therefore, in Russia, and the rest of the world would obviously be on side. However, this is going to play out. Now, at the same time, the Israel conflict has got to have almost burnt itself out. There can't be much Hamas left by the end of this year, if you will, which stands to reason that China, who has wanted to push for some form of Palestinian peace agreement. Now, I don't know if it means a one-state solution, a two-state solution, or no solution at all, but it seems that if you've got China, Russia, and a Trump administration on the same page, India flips to Trump within moments. It leaves Europe hanging in the breeze. It's almost as if it's that quick. Have you had any consideration about the geopolitics of all of this? Because if Trump can secure a peace deal with Russia, Ukraine, and Israel, Palestine without having to surrender any of the US-Israel bond, he's done what nobody else in the world has done and still leaves Netanyahu, whether he faces justice or not, or is thrown out himself for whatever reason, that Israel does its own cleansing, because there's a big difference between an Israeli government and the Jewish people. And people need to understand that nuance, that collective punishment of anyone is unacceptable. So given putting all that together there, how do you think people rationalize that Trump can be pro-Israel and pro-peace at the same time?
That was an incredibly articulate and well thought out question, probably one of the greatest ones I've ever had of my entire career. So I wanted to compliment you on that. One of the first things that you said, and you said a lot, was something about QAnon and QAnon people and things like that. Here's what I think of Q, okay? It's the 17th letter of the alphabet. That's my thoughts on Q. So with everything that you're talking about from a geopolitical standpoint, if President Trump doesn't win, none of that happens. So obviously, assuming that he does win, I think what happens first and foremost is we have a major issue on our hands with this BRICS,
Mm.
okay? And that is Brazil, Russia, India, what was the C? Canada,
It's
and the
China,
rest
South
of South
Africa,
Africa.
and they've
And
even
so
included now Iran and Saudi Arabia have accepted to be part of the BRICS
United
Plus.
Arab
Yeah.
Emirates and a
Yes.
few others. And so I think that that's going to be the number one thing, because cash is king, right? I mean, that's the dollar. The dollar kind of rules the world. And if there's a threat to the dollar from the outside, a real threat in this BRICS, I think that that's going to be one of the first things that he's going to have to take care of. As far as stopping the war in Ukraine, look, I've said this so many times. You know, in the American election, the left used to say Russia, 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 but it was never Russia, Russia, Russia. It was Ukraine, 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 and they were the ones, you know, that were interfering. Those are the ones, you know, through the Ukrainian embassy and working with all the different people there. The bottom line is we're dumping money into Ukraine mainly because they hold all of the secrets of the illegitimate Biden regime, all the crimes that they've done, from, you know, paying off the prosecutor and firing the prosecutor, to Burisma Holdings, to all the different things that they've done. That's where all the bodies are buried. They're buried in Ukraine. And so if Ukraine wants to join NATO, which of course Russia does not want that close of a NATO country next to their borders, and I completely understand that. I think that Ukraine is in the wrong here. I'm not one of those people that is supporting Ukraine in this situation. Honestly, I can clearly see the reasons why Russia, you know, did what they did. But the bottom line is it ties into the United States of America because of the fact that all the bodies are buried in Ukraine. And in order to continue to pimp out Biden for more and more money for the meat grinder, let's call it what it is, right? Ukraine is a meat grinder. They're not winning. So why do we keep dumping our taxpayer dollars in the United States into the meat grinder just to protect, because now Ukraine and Zelensky have something over the United States government? Continue to give us money or we're going to let all your skeletons out for the world to know. I believe that that's been going on. It's been going on since pretty much the beginning. And I think President Trump would step in. He would stop the madness. Ukraine would no longer be pushing to join NATO. And I think at that point, we would have a lot more peace in the area. Remember, when President Trump was in power, we did not have any major conflicts or any major wars. In fact, all we did was destroy the people that were creating them.
Mm. Very good point, isn't it? There were no new wars in the 4 years of Trump in office. I guess
Yeah.
to follow on, therefore, is collective punishment, whether it be on Palestinians or Israelis or Jewish people around the world or Muslim people around the world, can never be acceptable. You can't blame innocent people from how they were born. You don't choose to be born into a religion or a country or anything like that. So this is what is off limits. How do you or how is it rationalized in the United States now with this sort of push away, this split, if you will, amongst even Trump supporters that are saying they're pro-Palestine and therefore calling it even Trump is somehow manipulated or a controlled opposition. I mean, this might be a subject we'll save for the break afterwards. We might get started. I have a real problem with people dropping, oh, he's controlled opposition. That person is controlled opposition,
Right.
because they don't agree with this individual's perspective. And what it seems to do is it seems to white ant, or act like a termite within the movement to itself divide people more, because at the end of the day there's only two choices when it comes down to the next election. It'll be Republican Trump or whoever the Democrats choose to run. That's
Right.
all you get to choose from at this point in the game. We aren't at third party stage yet, Josh. So how do we work on this situation with people going for idealism and ending up dividing further?
Well, look, there's no question that our country is divided, but it's divided because the wrong people are in control of it. You know, one of the things that Trump, you know, didn't do was cause any racial tensions. Now, you can say maybe from the left's, you know, the perspective he could have been, but I don't see anything racially wrong with creating the most jobs for African Americans, in a 4-year period. I certainly don't see any problems with having more women in the workplace, for the largest amount in, I think, 41 years, and Hispanics, in the workplace, So what he did was to help every single person. And I think what's happening in America is that maybe they didn't like his mean tweets, maybe they didn't like his sarcasm, maybe they didn't like, the fact that he had no choice but to stick up for himself because 99.9% of the media in America was against him. So he had Twitter. He had to do what he had to do. How else was he going to get his message out there when they lie about him? So, putting all that into perspective, the American people are going to understand and go, I think I can handle some mean tweets and some weird comments for a great economy, lower inflation, lower gas prices, and a peaceful world. Did I get that in before the break?
You certainly did, and it's not hard, is it? It's not hard, is it, when you think about it, when it's always about the economy, and here we are in a world that every other distraction to take your eyes off the ball over what goes into your wallet and onto your table. Let's take that break, and we'll be back with more here on Weekends. You're watching and listening to TNT. Welcome back to Weekends. My guest this hour, Josh Bernstein from joshbernsteinuncensored.com. Now, Josh, you've got a brand new book out. I'm going to put the title up on the screen in a moment. It's called Preserving Liberty, Bold and Brave Solutions to Save America and Create Permanent Freedom. It's about the best title you could possibly have for a book. Tell us all about it.
It's been a lifelong dream to be able to put all of my solutions and ideas and bold ideas and radical liberty-based ideas into print. And I'm really excited about it. It's something that the country needs. It's going to be coming out October 8th. So I'm really excited that it's going to be out before the election. But folks, you can go and you can pre-order the book on Amazon. You can also pre-order it on Barnes & Noble's, Target, I believe, Walmart. It might be available, and Costco as well. And you can get it in Australia because that's one of the 5 countries that Simon & Schuster distributes to. So it's going to be a wonderful book. I'm really excited about it. You're going to learn a lot of different things about, how to, solve the immigration issues, how to basically bring more election integrity to the United States of America's elections. Believe it or not, we need to bring out some purple fingers, with ink that you can't wash off. Some countries around the world do things better than we do, and that's certainly one of them. We'll learn about China. I'll give you a real quick one on China because this is really important. I want everyone to know this, okay? There's a company called Temu. You know what it is. You see it all the time. The ads annoy you constantly all day long, and you go, my God, how did they get that price that low? Temu is owned by a company called Pandaodao. Pandaodao is the American way of saying it would be PDD Holdings, Inc. PDD Holdings, Inc. is associated with the Chinese Communist Party. More than that, the toys that they manufacture, the majority of the clothing they manufacture, the majority of everything they sell comes from the Zhejiang province in northwest China. Now, why do you think that they're able to undercut all of the dollar stores, all of the discount stores, and everything else in their pricing? Anybody want to venture to guess?
I'm thinking the labor cost is a little bit cheap.
Oh, it's a little cheap. Sure, it's actually free. You know why? Because they're using Uyghur Muslims in the area to make all their clothing and make all their toys and everything else. So, folks, when you see those little Temu ads, click away. You don't want to buy that. And the other thing that China's been doing lately, and you'll learn about this in the book as well, and I don't want to give too much else away, but just this one thing, when it says made in China, it's pretty clear to see where it's made. But when it says it's made in the PRC, you might not know what that means. Oh, that must just be some other area around the world. Who knows what that is? No, folks, that means the People's Republic of China. They're getting smarter because they understand that there's broadcasters out there like myself and many others that want to make sure that the countries around the world, especially America, are buying goods and services made in the United States of America by American workers and American hands and American sweat and American blood and American tears. And that's the same thing for Australia. You would want people to buy things made by Australians, so forth and so on. It's okay to be protectionist for your own country's love. There's nothing wrong with nationalism. If you're a nationalist for Australia, God bless you. That means you love your homeland, and there's nothing better than that. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't matter what country it is. And so, they talk about this white nationalist. Well, yeah, I am white and I am a nationalist, but I'm a nationalist for my country, and I believe in my country, and as any other country would want to believe in their country. And so I would advise anyone, not just the United States, but anyone, try to buy products that are made in your own country by your own people and help out your own businesses.
It's not hard, is it, when you think that if you went down the pathway of a digital ID and a central bank digital currency, that pretty much means that you're surveilled for the rest of your life, that a barter system one way or another would exist. And the best way that you would do that is by operating within your own local village or local area, which you may be forced to do anyway. But at the very least, you can come up with different ways of trading. So what you're saying is an advancement to that, is to create your own country as a village. I also want to make this point, Josh, that many people who were saying, comparing Trump as a Nazi, Trump to Hitler, etc., would use that comparison that Hitler was a nationalist. But if you look at Hitler's actions, he was trying to turn the world into Germany. He wasn't just saying Germany is Germany and the rest of you can do whatever you want. There's a very big difference, isn't it? Trump only wants to make America great again. He doesn't want to make the world America. Completely different idea.
That's absolutely correct. And, it's funny that you brought that up, because let's talk about who's acting like Hitler, who's acting like a Nazi. I think the one who's really not in control, because let's face it, he's not even in control of his own bowels, but he's really not in control of America. It's probably Barack Obama and many other people, and they're just pulling the strings for him. But regardless, so it's interesting that he's the one that put his political opponent in prison, or trying to put his political opponent in prison, but yet he's trying to say that somehow Trump is the Nazi. Trump is the bad guy that's going to kill, America. And meanwhile, the leading candidate and former president is being charged with absolute garbage. I don't know how much time you have, but I can tell you some things that this charge, okay, how they call this a witch hunt? It's not a witch hunt, because you need to actually have a legitimate case for it to even be a witch hunt. Here's what they did. They didn't have the ability to bring this case, so they brought it to the tax part of New York, and they looked into it and they said there's no tax evasion here, there's no problems. Then they brought it into the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, and there's nothing there. So when they couldn't get anything, they basically tried to say that somehow President Trump knew about a falsified document. This is where they're going. By the way, the falsified document, even if it was true, which it wasn't, that would have been a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor is not strong enough of a charge to bring it to the court. So what did they do? They lied. They made something up saying that somehow President Trump knew about the falsified signature, and so therefore now it's concealment. Concealment kicks it up to a felony, and that is how they brought the thing to court. Okay? Then what this idiot judge did is it's never been done in the United States criminal court history ever. Never, not even once. What he basically told these people is, if 4 of you agree that he's guilty of A, and 4 of you agree that he's guilty of B, and if 4 of you agree he's guilty of C, then I'll just take all of them, put it together, and we'll have a dozen, and we'll have a unanimous conviction. That's never been done in the history of the United States. It's not going to stand. This judge is, insane to even try this. But here's the thing. I said in the beginning, it's not a witch hunt because the case couldn't be brought. Well, according to the Judicial Code of the New York State 100.5, it clearly states that any person who is a residing or sitting judge, if they are donating to any political organizations or candidates while as a presiding judge, they are automatically disqualified from taking a case like that. And so that's why I said it's even part of the Judicial Code of New York that what this judge did. He broke so many laws. It's ridiculous what they did and how they did this. They just created this, a multiple figure 8 pretzel to try to somehow stick this on them, and it's all going to unravel. It's like sucking in your gut. Eventually, you got to let it out, right? So it's the same exact thing here.
I guess the strategy from the Democrats' perspective is that you're moving up to a Republican convention. You've got a conviction now, so they can say that we're the nice guys, you're running a convicted felon, and that argument can run as long as they want until the appeal happens. So they've kind of already assessed the damage. Now, just to throw a few scenarios out here, Tucker Carlson has warned of a potential, taking out of Trump. That's how desperate they would get. But let's go to the other side of this. Joe Biden's on the nose. Joe Biden has got dementia. Joe Biden shuffles. Joe Biden is unwell. Joe Biden doesn't even have the same earlobe that he had 5 years ago, which I always find astounding. I just think, no, can nobody pick this one up, that the right earlobe is joined, whereas before it hung? Is it somebody else? Is it plastic surgery? I don't know, but it's enough to raise questions. It says to me that it's likely that if they wanted enough sympathy, Joe Biden goes to sleep one night and never wakes up the next day. Would that provide enough sympathy for Democrat voters to usher in somebody else to become the president? I don't know what the scenario is, but there is plenty of big-named people speculating that Biden will not be the candidate. Have you got thoughts about who they may run, or will Biden go the distance?
Oh, I highly doubt he's going to go to the distance. The state of Ohio was basically saying you have to declare who your candidate is going to be for the Democrats by a certain time. And they kept putting it off and putting it off. And now what they're doing is they're planning on doing this through virtual at the convention. They said that they're going to nominate them virtually at the convention, but they're not going to be at the convention. So there's obviously something going on. There's something, in the works, I hope that it's not Big Mike. If you don't know who Big Mike is, I think you can probably figure that one out on your own. And I hope it's not Gruesome Newsom, but I am worried about Gruesome Newsom, who I've always compared to be the Ted Bundy of politicians. So I don't know. There was a rumor that Bernie Sanders might even thought about jumping back in and running again. Look, they stole it from him once. They stole it from him twice. They gave him 1 million homes and cars and who knows what else. And maybe, they said, look, we need you now because you're a radical socialist and we've got these crazies on campus and crazies everywhere. So they'll vote for you and we can figure out a way to steal it. I don't know. It's really hard to say at this point. I would like to see him go the distance. Remember, this is the earliest presidential debate in U.S. history for a reason. So maybe they're just going to put him out there as a sacrificial lamb and just, let him, not be able to say one coherent sentence the whole night. And the people are panicked. And now all of a sudden there's sympathy for another candidate. See, look, we can't possibly put him up. You saw what happened that night, and this and that. So look, these people are sinister. They're evil. They're sadistic. And they'll stop at literally nothing to try to remain in power. And that's why I have dedicated my entire life to fighting them. I will continue to fight them till my last breath. And for folks out there, please pre-order the book. My editor told me the more pre-orders we get on the book, the higher the algorithms go on Amazon. The higher the algorithms go on Amazon, the more promotion it gets. And then other independent book distributors could then pick it up to sell it as well. And, it's kind of one of those things when there's a lot of activity, there's got to be something going on next to it. And so if you could, I would really appreciate it. Just go to Amazon and put in Preserving Liberty book. And I guarantee you, you're not going to be disappointed when you read that book.
Well, that's terrific. I might get the panel guys to put that up on the screen when they get a moment to show everyone the book. And if it's coming out in October, it's a nice way to pre-order an early Christmas present or somebody's birthday present, perhaps a certificate for Father's Day. Our Father's Day here in Australia is in September. Might be something you can say that you picked up a nice surprise. And I, for one, love receiving a book on those special occasions because it actually marks a place in history, what you received on a given date. So that is a really nice idea and a suggestion there, and you can support Josh at the same time. Josh, looking along here, art imitating life. I was a big fan of the West Wing TV series and the character of I can't remember his name, but Leo McGarry, who was the vice president, who was going to be nominated as the VP in that particular time. He dies. John Spencer was the actor. He dies in real life during production, and they write it into the series that he dies about to go on to a debate or something like that. And I just look at this stuff, and all the world is a stage, and expect the unexpected is what I'm trying to say. We don't know what's going to happen, but many people are obviously trying to piece together what will happen in the most craziest time in history, but also the most important election for the United States. And realistically, it's for the world at this stage, Josh. So all eyes are on the United States.
Yeah, they all are, and they should be. Not to be arrogant, but the United States is the country that kind of leads the world, and it needs to lead the world, because if it doesn't lead the world, then that means that somebody else is filling that vacuum, and what that vacuum is more than likely China. And China wants to dominate the world, and we've got to do everything we can to make sure that that never happens. So America has got to do the right thing. They've got to watch everything, watch the machines. They've got to do everything they can to secure these elections. And I say this a lot on my show. I say, for the folks that are guilty of stealing the United States, of America's election in 2020 in the urban cities, redeem yourselves by protecting the vote in 2024. So we'll see what happens.
It's remarkable, isn't it, to think that a country that is happy to go to war to defend democracy around the world can't secure its own election, or at least half the country doesn't believe it. And at the same time, fighting for democracy in Ukraine with a president who's now gone over his term limit. So he's now an illegitimate president. He has banned media. He has banned opposition parties, but he represents democracy. The hypocrisy of American defending democracy. Maybe that's the title of my book, Josh, but this is the most frustrating thing. And who would have thought that the outlier, the man who is not a professional politician until 2016, 2017, is the man to rectify the situation? We haven't even had a chance to talk about it, but Julian Assange in all of this, the Australian, that's another case that we watch on, because the truth shall set us free, Josh, in the end of it, right?
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, I was on your show. We talked about Julian Assange, and I think we were both in agreement on that. That's a really bad situation, and it's uncalled for. It's unnecessary, and he should be released, and he should be given the medical attention that he so rightfully deserves. And it's just another stain on an imperfect country. The United States is not perfect, certainly. But I think that with the amount of power that we have exerted over the entire world in our existence, we certainly have used our power for much, much, much more good than bad. I truly believe that deep down in my heart. And like I said before, America's got to lead. If America doesn't lead, somebody else will, and who knows where they'll lead us to, probably straight to hell.
Yeah, absolutely. We need the great big clean out, and we need more support from more people like yourself. Josh Bernstein, jbushow.com is where you go. Josh, thanks for your time today. Much appreciated.
Thank you. God bless.
Hey, Josh Bernstein here, America's favorite bald badass. Did you know that Bill O'Reilly charges $6.95 a month to see his content? Or how about the Blaze TV, who charges $10 a month? Or you could always subscribe to the Ben Shapiro podcast at $12 a month. But if you are looking for the best value and the most hardest hitting news, you've come to the right spot. Because here at JoshBernsteinUncensored.com, we drop the most jaw-dropping stories 7 days a week, starting at only $3 a month. So please head on over to the new releases tab, become an exclusive member of the Badass Nation, and join the fight to save this country with one of America's most hated, feared, and censored conservative voices. Remember, if it's banned on social media, you'll find it here. God bless.